into this review, I should probably slap this on the screen right now.
Viewer discretion is advised.
Okay, that's probably a wee bit of an overstatement, but I'm just doing this because I don't want little kids finding this because it has Thomas the Tank Engine in it, because it's really not for them. To give you a bit of insight, this is what we're in for. Yeah, really. And if you're like me and you've been on the internet for quite some time, stuff like this won't really bug you. But because I'm nice, I am going to say, if any of you happen to be squeamish about blood or gore or screaming or skeletons, then I suggest you just leave this video. Either that or scroll down to the comments. There'll probably be someone there waiting to give you a nice hug. Or call you a fag, I don't know, it's YouTube, so what do you know. So anyway, so Shed 17 is a fan-made video made by Paul Viz, channel link in the description, which talks about the theory that the trains are actually people and the truth will shock you, what really happened on the island of Sodor. No, this theory isn't new. Hell, it's probably as old as Thomas the Tank Engine itself. But this is the first time I've actually seen it be put into practice. I only discovered this video a couple of weeks ago, the same day I released a teaser, when my brother showed it to me and I had to make a video talking about it. I'll put the link to the original in the description if anybody wants to watch that one without getting any spoilers. Anyway, let's just jump in. Wait, what the? Oh, okay, I thought my browser was broken or something. So this video opens with an edited version of the old Thomas the Tank Engine opening from the 80s, showing shots comparing from the past to the present. It's very well made and it does set the tone very, very well. Although one thing I have to comment on is the music. This slow, eerie version of the theme song really does set the mood, and being someone who grew up watching the show when I was a kid, it's particularly chilling, especially the ending. The only gripe I have with the opening is the fact they used this engine instead of a British tank engine. I mean, were there no creepy images of abandoned tank engines? Actually, hold up, let me check. This could work with some clever editing. So this thing plays out like a mockumentary or documentary talking about the dark side of the engines of Sodor, with character interviews, found footage and stuff like that. To be honest, this is probably the best way to tell a story like this. It makes it unique and it actually makes it stand out really well. It's animated in a way that's reminiscent of the show before they shifted to CGI, and it does fit the overall look and feel of the story. So, where do we start the story about Thomas the Tank Engine? Why, with Nazis, of course! Did I really just say Thomas the Tank Engine and Nazis in the same sentence? So it talks about this one member of the Nazi party.
Professor Wilhelm Goetze.
I'm sorry, what?
Professor Wilhelm Goetze.
What was that?
Professor Wilhelm Goetze.
Wilhelm what?
Goetze.
Goetz. Screw it, I'm calling him Gozer. So Gozer claimed to be a low-ranking member of the party who was shocked and horrified at the rumours of what the Nazis were doing, when in actuality he was doing experiments that were even worse than what the Nazis were up to. It's only when questions started flooding in that he took off from Germany and ran to Sodor with his wife and son Hans. Now, I know what you're thinking. What the hell does this have to do with anything about Thomas the Tank Engine? To which I say, shut it! You'll learn in a second.
Studying under his father, Hans left at the age of 18 and went to university on the mainland, studying biology and engineering, writing several pioneering papers about genetics and the splicing of DNA with mechanical implants. He called it biofusion, the technique of manipulating genetic material to splice with mechanical attachments.
Yep, it's this kind of story. It's going exactly where you think it's going to. So after making a name for himself on the mainland with this biofusion thing, Hans comes back to Sodor and builds up a research facility on the island. He also has a kid. And this is when things start to get really creepy. Well, for me anyway.
The town was buzzing with news of her pregnancy.
Baby Thomas was born in 1968. Throughout the early years of his life, he would watch the growing railway network with fascination.
And if you're like me, this is the point where you knew exactly what was going to happen. So it's shown that Thomas was pretty well loved throughout Sodor and that he had many friends and a passion for train spotting. Oh, and there's a neat little Easter egg for Game of Thrones fans.
He was friends with everyone, even that simple bloke who could only say where he lived.
Sodor.
Oh, and the Fat Control is an asshole in this version. Yeah, what a shock.
Topham Hatt. Born into money, he took his ridiculous name to heart and started wearing a top hat all the time. Of course, the islanders had a different name for him.
Fat bastard. You've never met such a cold-hearted as him. He banned all steam engine volunteers and cut most up rail employees. Shut down the branch line and the smaller stations. He was happy to let the railway rust away, just like they did to the main line.
So the railway suffers under the fat bastard's control, but it takes a more profitable turn from something pretty tragic. Alright, place your bets. What's gonna happen?
Come on, we're gonna be late.
What's the time?
Thomas, get moving.
Young Thomas loved following railway. He'd be out all the time, hoping to catch a new train on his camera.
11:45's coming through soon.
He won't wait for us.
Unfortunately, he didn't take as much notice of the safety signs.
I'm not being late again.
Have we missed it yet? Wait for the 11:45.
Never mind the 11:45.
It must be late again.
Thomas, come on.
It's always held up.
I will admit this did get me the first time I saw it. See, this is how jump scares are supposed to work. The train didn't make any noise, there's no reaction from the other kid, it came very quickly, and there's quite a lot of build up before it happened. You knew it was going to happen, you just didn't know when. And for the record, yes, this is the only real jump scare in this whole video. There are some minor ones near the end, but nothing like this. So yeah, Thomas is killed by a train, and the Gozers take his boy to Shed 17. And this is just a little nitpick, but my dad works with trains, and he said that apparently when someone is hit by a train, they either get sliced up to pieces or they blow up like a balloon full of meat, and there's no body to be found. So how could there be body to take to Shed 17? Actually, why am I talking about this? Why am I thinking so hard about that when there's even weirder stuff coming up? Oh yeah, this isn't even the weird part. So a year after the Gozers bring Thomas's body to Shed 17, this happens.
It took me a moment to realise what it was I was looking at. When he looked at me and said,
Hiya, Mr. Hartley.
it dawned on me what Hans Goetzer and his dad had done. One woman passed out as Thomas smiled at us. I had to run off round the side of the shed.
Hey, are you alright, Keith?
So we get a running joke of Keith throwing up every time he's in an interview and every time someone mentions what happened with Thomas. I'm going to admit it was funny, but it's a bit stretched out, a bit overly long, but not to the point where it had the Family Guy effect and it annoyed me or anything, so I'll let it pass. So Thomas is dubbed the Sodor experiment, and it becomes so famous that celebrities start requesting to be biofused into engines. If I had to guess, I'd say this is a commentary on how dumb people can be, throwing money at something that's not even perfected and only has one success and an uncertain future. I don't really know. And then it goes into detail how Thomas's organs have been manipulated so they would accept mechanical implants infused with the metal within the engine. I'm not even going to try and explain this because, to be honest, it doesn't make a ton of sense, but it's passable and it is explained in a way that it does kind of make sense, so I guess I can let that go. So the Gozers initially refused to work on other people and also refused to allow Thomas to work on the railway, as any problem could potentially rupture his organs or boil him alive. But the fat bastard obviously saw this as profitable, so he agreed to have people turn into engines and have them work on the railway. The facility is closed, and Shed 17 is pronounced off limits, while they get to work on biofusing other people into engines. So the first engine to be biofused was James, who they say didn't have that much money as the others did, but they just get a glance over it. If I'm honest, I thought this would have been a great opportunity for them to explain the reason why James's brakes were made of wood and why he wasn't made right and why he had so many accidents because he didn't have the money. But, I don't know, maybe I'm spoiled. But they do notice that the new biofused engines do keep having accidents, starting with Edward, as it's shown here in a deleted scene when they were filming the TV show.
Whistled Edward. Thank you very much.
Sadly, this was only the first in an increasing number of incidents.
Another vehicle that was biofused was Harold, but since he was more interested in helicopters than trains, he was turned into a helicopter. But while it was successful, Harold was banned from flying for reasons he was never told, so he was always kept on the ground. Don't worry, it's explained later. And then it's shown why diesel engines were not used on the railway in this experiment with Mavis, which is shown to go horribly wrong.
Diesel began to burn her internal organs. Everything organic in the engine was soon burning.
Have you ever heard a locomotive scream in pain? We tried rinsing out the fuel tank with water, but by then it was too late.
That's a shame. I liked Mavis. As more and more engines fail, Wilhelm Golzer is horrified by what the fat bastard is doing with the engines and decides to kill himself.
Professor Wilhelm couldn't come to terms with what was happening to his engines, and took the only course he thought he could take.
So things get worse, but the straw that broke the camel's back was an experiment that involved Gordon blowing up, killing many people, in probably the second most gruesome scene in this thing.
The fire.
But that fat bastard held us back. He wanted to see what would happen.
He argued he had put a lot of work into Gordon, and the chances to get him working were too great an opportunity. He was literally cooking from the inside. By the time we were allowed to act, it was too late.
I wasn't as near to him as some of them. All I could do was run. I was lucky to get away with some singed clothes.
The fat bastard refuses to let people know this or even get people to hospital, and he eventually decides to use Harold, but...
We all breathed a sigh of relief and loaded the injured people aboard. Then it all went wrong.
Harold's engine had worked fine, but what no one realized was most of Harold's lower extremities were permanently fused to his propeller system. As Harold's rotor blades began to spin, vital organs would be drawn into the motor and tear him apart from the inside.
Did I mention this was a creepypasta? So people keep asking questions, but the fat bastard orders the mess be cleaned up and nobody to say anything. And they use Henry, the only working engine besides Thomas. Which is quite kind of funny given how sick Henry was in the show. But at some point, Henry accidentally comes across Shed 17 and confronts the fat bastard about it. After that, Henry tells Thomas not to go to Shed 17, and for that, the fat bastard has Henry go on the Flying Kipper run, which is the most risky and dangerous run for trains in the winter, and this is to get rid of him.
Fat shite always hated Henry. He didn't like his cheerful manner, and he clearly had other lifestyle choices when he was a human. Fat wanted Henry away from the other engines, and Kipper Run was a death sentence.
Now, long-time Thomas fans would remember the episode called Henry and the Flying Kipper, which is one of the most famous episodes of the show. And I have to say, tying this with that episode, it's a nice touch, I gotta say. So, while on the TV show, Henry crashed into trucks purely by accident. What actually happened was that the fat bastard put a rail spike in the rail so they freeze that way and forced Henry to crash into the trucks and explode. This was apparently caught on camera by a train spotter and was hidden for decades without anybody seeing it. It's only being revealed now. So Henry crashes into the trucks, and while on the TV show his driver and fireman jumped clear and survived, in reality they died. After this, Henry sent a crew to be fixed, I mean destroyed. The idea of a world full of sentient engines suddenly became a lot more disturbing. So Thomas decides that enough is enough, and he heads to Shed 17 himself to see what Henry was warning him about. When he finally gets to the shed, we finally find out that Thomas was, in fact, all along, a clone. Yes, apparently the Gozers made numerous other Thomases in the past until they got this one right, and the reason the other engines didn't work was because they didn't have the same time or effort put into them. And again, I'm not even going to try and explain the science behind this, because how the fuck would I know? So, yes, Thomas finds out he's a clone, he sees loads of failed versions of himself, and he finds out what's lurking within Shed 17. And I'm just gonna let this play it out for itself. Don't worry, I'll be back. I'm just gonna, I don't know, make a sandwich or something. I'll come back in a few minutes.
He had no idea he was only one of many clones. None of us did. But I guess as time passed, we stopped asking all the questions we had at first. We were just glad our friend was back with us. He could work for us. He became our servant in a way. Someone who drew in the crowds, helped create jobs, was eager to work. Thomas always thought of us as his friends. Sadly, over time we came to think of him as just really useful.
So this is what they mean by the term jump out of your skin. So that was Shed 17, and I gotta say, it's interesting. Does it make sense? Barely. Does it need to exist? Not really. Does this make it bad? Absolutely not. Let's face it, it's a dumb creepypasta, but it's a good dumb creepypasta, and those things are rare to come by. The way they structured it is perfect. They could easily have drawn this out, but they kept it to the same length of a real documentary you'd see on TV, which is the ideal length for this sort of story. Any shorter or longer would either made it too rushed or drawn out, so this was perfect. I would crack on the visuals more since, let's face it, they're not great. But the way it's shot and animated with clever use of effects and filters really capture what Paul was going for, and it's all worth it just to see the last 4 minutes, which in my opinion makes up for any of the shortcomings that are in this thing. Either it's funny and scary, it's scary but not funny, it's funny but not scary, or it's neither. For me, I'm more in the first category, less so since I've seen this countless times since I was editing it, but the first time it did creep me out, but I still like it. And before anybody asks me, no, this did not ruin my childhood memories of Thomas the Tank Engine. I could still watch it fine. Anyway, I'm glad I saw this, and I'll probably watch it again. Probably at Halloween or something, which is perfect for this. And I'm kind of interested to see what Paul will do next. So, yeah, good on you, mate. So, anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Have a good day. Thanks, guys. Cheers.